Here we go. Thank you. Our first sort of presentation of the day is going to be an update on the Long-Term Education Planning Commission. Neal Steinberg, who is a friend and also a colleague in terms of looking at education and education reform, came to a realization that the efforts of incremental reform were not going to work. So Neal called together a collection of stakeholders, our association, the principals, the superintendents, the unions, the colleges and universities, RIPEC, to meet on a regular basis, members from the Council on Elementary Secondary Education as well, to develop a long-term plan. And the idea behind that is if you take a look at where we were 25 years ago and where Massachusetts was 25 years ago, we were pretty close in terms of how we competed on the National Assessment for Educational Progress, which is the national test that we use to measure where we stand relative to other states. And what happened in Mass in 1993, the legislature, which was a Democratic legislature, and a Republican governor who was somewhat of a fiscal conservative, came together. They developed a plan. They stayed with the plan over the long term. It wasn't easy at first. There were a lot of political interests that were going to be trampled on or put at risk, and you had to overcome some of those obstacles. But they had a vision. They had a plan. They stayed with the plan. And as a result, Massachusetts has arguably the highest performing system in the country, and they compete favorably on national tests. Rhode Island, on the other hand, we've done incremental education reform. And as I like to say, every time we see a little bit of a recession, all the best intentions of moving forward evaporate, and they're blown away in the wind of a fiscal downturn. Sometimes the changes are a result of changes in leadership. We are on, I've been doing this a little bit of time, but we're on our 5th commissioner. And I wish her well, I really do. I hope that she hits the ground running and she really tackles some of the fundamental problems. But Neal kind of came to the conclusion that we've got to get all the stakeholders in the room. We've got to get a consensus on the way forward. It doesn't have to be Massachusetts's process. I mean, we're a different state. We've got our own problems. We've got our own opportunities. So the intent here is to come to consensus on what works, stay the course. The governor may change, the legislature may change, school committees may change, the Council on Education, the commissioner. All of those changes will probably inevitably take place over the course of time. The question is, how do you develop a plan and let the plan succeed where the politicians haven't been able to do that? So without further ado, I'm going to ask Neal to give you an update as to where this is. This is all part of the context of looking at education and governance reform.
Thanks, Tim. Let me not screw up somebody's PowerPoint here. Thanks. It's great to be here this morning, especially since it is not 70 degrees and warm, and I hope we all get out of here before it is. Perfect setup. You know, Marianne, Tim has inspired us with his depressing words earlier that we better train our kids better in math so we have people that can figure out a damn budget. We can't even figure out the odds on gambling, and whether we have to have a course on that somewhere in classrooms, I don't know. But clearly, basic budgeting and basic numbers and basic math is something that we need. Marianne talked about kind of, our neighbors next door. I carry the same book with me from David Driscoll, and as I will tell you, he's working very closely on this. So as Tim said, at the Rhode Island Foundation, and hopefully many of you know us, we're the largest funder to the nonprofit organizations in the state. We gave out $52 million in grants last year. We raised over $100 million, and we do leadership and advocacy. And we're looking at funding not only immediate needs, but long-term systemic solutions. So where do we concentrate? We concentrate on health, we concentrate on economic security, and we concentrate on education while we're still funding basic human services and arts and environment and those other things. So a little over a year ago, as we were looking at things, we noticed in two areas actually, in healthcare and health and in education, no long-term plans. This state has not a long-term vision, no long-term plan that everybody walking down the street could say, hey, that's what we're trying to do in education. And as we studied, as everybody has by now, our neighbors right to the north, and I had a chance to sit down with David Driscoll, and one of the things he said to me was startling was, you know, I've never understood why Rhode Island couldn't do this. We're not comparing to California or Texas or New York that are radically different. It's right up the street. And, you know, yeah, Boston and Cambridge have an economy that you know, very few people will ever see. But many people describe Massachusetts as Boston and Cambridge surrounded by 7 Rhode Islands. So when you look at the Lawrence and the Fall Rivers and the Lowells and things, you know, old New England mill towns, things like that, that's what we need to do. So we did an op-ed, said, hey, we need long-term planning, and if nobody else is going to do it, we'll get a group together. And that's what we did. And as Tim said, and I think it's in your program there, I think it was Dan McGowan's article, it lists, I think, most of the people that are on the group, is to bring everybody under the tent. One of the things that we suffer from in this state is that many, many, many meetings to solve things have 75% of all the people who need to be there in the room, and there's always somebody missing. So when I go around and I talk like this, and I talk to a lot of business groups, because if you talk to Driscoll, business involvement and business support was one of the major things. Brian Goldner, who is the chairman of Hasbro, says that 50% of his employees in Pawtucket live in Massachusetts to get a better education. Electric Boat has said for years, I validated it, it's still true, they need our 3rd and 4th graders to fulfill those subcontracts. Highest Latino achievement gap in the United States. What's our fastest growing population in the state? I'm an old banker. From a business point of view, that is the same as your business is not treating your fastest growing customer base the way you need to survive in business. So it's things like that. So when I talk to people, and a lot of these, as I said, especially the business groups, I'll hear things like, oh, those damn unions, okay? Now, you know, that's a battle cry. There's very little detail all the time. Could be around contracts, could be around something like that. So I sat down with Bob Walsh and with Frank Flynn when we started this. I said, A, you guys need to come to the table, and this is what we're hearing. So you can either be the damn unions, or you could be part of the solution. So when we got this group together, 25-ish people, you'll see the list, we had several ground rules. In addition to, you know, don't yell at people or hit people, it was leave your stripes at the door. Don't want to hear all about principals. Don't want to hear all about superintendents. All important factors, this is for the students. Leave your stripes at the door. The other is think long-term. Very, very difficult. If you go into a school today, and we're out talking to teachers, and we're talking to students and parents and principals all over the state. If you go there tactically, what are you going to hear in the short term? Our water fountains don't work, we don't have enough history books, blah, 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 blah. All perfectly valid, you deal with it all the time, and thank you for dealing with it. Short term, not long term. That mantra, and it's the one we are pushing, high standards and stay the course. I'm going to read something to you that'll take about a minute, and I'd love to hear your reaction. And I'll try and leave time at the end of my allotted time for questions. Rhode Island and the nation are faced with a serious crisis that is not well understood by the general public, nor by many leaders in the public and private sectors. Simply stated, this crisis can be summarized as follows. The public education system is failing to provide its students with the knowledge and skills necessary for them to be productive, informed citizens in coming decades. The prospect of an undereducated citizenry unable to understand or cope with issues arising in the management of the country and state should alarm everyone. In addition, the ability of many public school students and graduates to qualify even for entry-level jobs or to compete successfully with their counterparts from other industrialized countries is a clear signal that the education system needs to undergo dramatic improvements soon. Future trends in the workforce will exacerbate the severity of this problem if corrections are not undertaken immediately. The implication of this crisis is so serious that Rhode Island must change its priorities, putting public education reform at or near the top of its agenda, because passage and implementation of meaningful reform will take time. The process must begin immediately. Most of the year 2030 workforce is already in our schools. But there is reason to be optimistic about our capacity to improve the system in the state. There is widespread belief in the need for a quality public system of education. There's growing understanding that the schools need to improve, and there are many dedicated people still working in the system. Yet education needs help from outside to bring about needed change and improvement. Concerned groups and individuals who can act as change agents and catalysts to get momentum underway and who can accept the responsibility of leadership in this very important undertaking. Does that sound like a realistic assessment of where we are now? Okay? The moral of the story, that was written in 1991 for Massachusetts. And all I did of this big report done by the Mass Business Alliance on Education called Every Child a Winner, I took the first 2 pages of the executive summary, crossed out Massachusetts, and put in Rhode Island. But the point is 1991, in preparation for the 1993 reforms. When I read that at business groups, it's startling to them because people are used to long-term planning. So that's the key. So what are we trying to do in this planning group? We're not trying to supersede anything done in the short term. Now, the commissioner is part of this group. Barbara Cottom, who's chair of the Board of Ed, is in this group, and all the other necessary people that are around the table. We had one criticism that I heard in the beginning, and that was, you've got all the same, in parentheses, old people who got us there around the table. How are you going to affect change? And it only had one answer. They're still in charge. So you can form a renegade group. We can get 19-year-olds to tell us what to do. We can get 12-year-olds to tell us what to do. We're not going to be able to get it done unless the people who are there now and in positions of influence can band together and get this done. We're trying to get 80% of the way there. You can't get anything 100% done in this country anymore. When I came up in my business career, if I wanted to sell you these glasses for $3 and you offered me $1, an hour later, we'd agree on $2. Now, $3 goes to that polarized corner, and $1 goes over there, and there's never compromise. So that's our goal. We're trying to get 80% of the way there. We're trying to get collectively and have this group. And the way we do it, we're doing vision, we're doing goals. That's where we are now. Then we're getting to strategies, and then tactics. And we will present it. At the very beginning of this effort, I met with the governor, I met with the speaker, I met with the Senate president. We meet and update Senators Gallo and Pearson, Rep. Amori and McNamara are the key people on this to make sure that we're in sync and they know what's coming down the road. To Tim's point earlier, it's a 10-year plan. This governor will not be here, this speaker will not be here, Senate president will not be here, some of us won't be in the positions we're in. We have to, though, stay the course. Now, one of the things with Massachusetts, as you may know, so the RICAS scores, brilliant. Now we've got a direct comparison. I met with the governor a week after the RICAS scores came out, and I made 2 comments, one serious and one wise guy. The serious one was, I asked her to please stop calling it a wake-up call. It wasn't a wake-up call. It was validation of what everybody in this room has known for at least the last 10 years on where we stand on the testing. It was just more direct. And the wise guy comment was that I heard the busiest person around the day after the RICAS scores came out was a real estate broker in Seekonk, Massachusetts, selling houses there because of the comparison. And as in McGowan's article there, I think was the quote that I use all the time about the benchmarking. Massachusetts benchmarks against Singapore, we benchmark against Louisiana and Alabama. If that is what we want, folks, then we should just say it. That we want mediocre education, middle of the pack, our kids will get whatever jobs they can and go on our merry way. We don't want that. I don't think anybody in this room does, certainly because of the hard work that you do in the communities. I don't think people do. But it just isn't going to happen. But incremental change isn't going to do it. So here's where we are now. I'm going to read to you what we've come up with a long-term vision and principles. And just so you know the way we do this, to get accountability with the people in that room, each step along the way, they sign. They signed. I'm going to claim that we've got the only piece of paper that has both the superintendent, has all, the superintendent association, both unions, the principals associations, the League of Cities and Towns, business community, RIPEC, all signing on this document. And that's what we will do along the way. So the vision Rhode Island's world-class public education system prepares all students, underscore all, to succeed in life and contribute productively to the community, to equitably and urgently deliver on this vision, and here are the values and goals. Put students at the center, ensuring that school is rewarding, engaging, and responsive to interests and needs. Respect, enable, empower, and value teaching. Serve students who are being left behind and close the achievement gaps. Deliver relevant learning so students are prepared for the current and future economy. Engage families in actively shaping student experiences. Leverage the expertise of community partners and the support of all Rhode Islanders. Somebody told me that 75% of the taxpayers don't have a child in the education system. I don't know if that's true. Tim, maybe you know that. 75% of the taxpayers don't have a child in the school system. We have an aging population. Okay, so even if it's close to that, we've got to get everybody on board, not just the people who have kids in the schools. Distribute leadership so decisions are made at the appropriate level for the greatest benefit of students. Hold audits accountable for student learning. Provide sufficient resources and distribute them equitably. Align policy structures, supports to work best for students and teachers. And then the most important one, saved for last, set ambitious statewide standards and high expectations. And the word that we use all the time that Mary Ann said, stay the course. When Massachusetts did the MCAS, their scores were not a lot better than our RICAS scores. We're comparing them now 10 years later. It took them a good 5 years to start seeing the results. The magic to them staying the course, in addition to political will somehow bowing to economic and social will, was they started to see success. If you see success, you're going to stay the course. If you don't see success, logic tells you you're not going to stay the course. So that's what we're trying to do. We will now go down. So everybody will listen to that and they'll say, boy, that sounds great. How are you going to do it? That's what we're working on next. And again, we're looking 10 years down the road. I would tell you that, and I will say this very enthusiastically, and I've been around a long time too, this is a moment in time. This is truly a moment in time. We've got long-term planning. We've got legislation that some of it you are championing on curriculum, on governance, that follow a Massachusetts model. And as you know, Driscoll's the first one, David Driscoll's the first one to say, Massachusetts isn't perfect, you don't have to copy everything, but they are a role model. They have achievement gaps, but they start up here, ours are down here. Long-term planning. Legislation that is aligned with that long-term planning, looking at things like governance and curriculum. A new commissioner and a focus, use that word, on our largest school system with the biggest challenges. Province is not going to fix itself. Province is a huge challenge. We could fix Central Falls and it makes this much difference if we don't fix our capital city and provide better education for those kids. Several years ago, I met with A.T. Wall when he was heading the prison system. And I said to him, pretty logically, I said, okay, if we can get more kids to graduate from Central High School, Mount Pleasant, Hope, will less people wind up at your institution at the ACI? And he said, absolutely. Graduating from high school is one way to prevent people from entering the prison system. And I said, can you guess a percentage? 10% of the increase, whatever. Can you do that? Yep, we've got pretty good evidence. I said, okay, and I'm right. 50 to 60 grand a year, like going to Harvard to send them to the ACI. He said, yes. So we did the math. If graduation went up by X percent and a small percentage of those didn't go to the ACI, how much money you would save? And then I asked him the question that was the hard one. I said, oh, can we have that savings so we can do the intervention program? No. So we have to recognize the difference between expense and investment. And investment is a dollar that pays off down the road. Without insulting our legislature, I have a high degree of respect for the work that they do and the time they put in. Many people up there do not know the difference between an expense and an investment. They look at short-term expenses, cutting a budget, balancing here and there, and not that this dollar of prevention, of this dollar in a great program will save us $10, $50 down the road. So that's what we're doing. We're going to keep the group together. We will present. The goal is to come up with recommendations. As I said, we're out there talking and getting input from people all over the state in different areas principals, teachers, parents, et cetera. So far, the response and the support has been very good. We'll keep getting the signatures, and then we will present it. When I met last with the Senate President and gave him an update, he said, "What can I do to help?" And I said one thing. I said, when we're done, we want to present these results. We want to enthusiastically come in and say, we've got a lot of people behind this. High standards, stay the course. To you, the speaker, and the governor, all in the same meeting, so we don't have to do it 3 times. He laughed. That's our problem. We will push that. I don't care if I have to take a billboard out. I don't care if I have to invite them each to lunch and not tell them the other 2 are coming. We need everybody on board on this. You're doing great work. You're looking at governance changes that are revolutionary for the state, looking at models like Massachusetts. We're looking at curriculum reform that supports the instruction and the testing. We're looking at investing in our teachers. The teaching profession, when I was a kid, when many of you were kids, if you went home and complained about your teacher to your mother, who'd your mother side with? Right, every single time. My understanding is that doesn't happen anymore. Okay, you got the helicopter or bulldozer parents or whatever you want to call them now. The profession itself, we need to up our game. I met with President Sanchez the other day and very bluntly told him one of the weaknesses that's being identified in our process is training our teachers. We don't need a gazillion 3rd grade teachers anymore. We need teachers that can teach STEM. We need teachers that can do special ed. We need teachers that are ELL experts. I met with the new commissioner. She's going to be starting next week. I don't know her well. You know as much as I do. She will be part of this group. You look at her resume, she hits a lot of the areas. So I do think, and I will end on this, I do think and feel very strongly that this is a moment in time. We need to collectively push these agendas together. They start to look like, even if they start disparately, they start to look like they're organized, they start to look like they're collective, and they start to look like they can be impactful. So again, I want to thank you for your support. Tim has been great. He's a guiding light. He's got institutional memory and history, and he's open to new solutions. That's what we needed on this. The union so far, at least in this process, been very open to things. We know we need to significantly change achievement gaps, close those achievement gaps. We need our workforce, we need good citizens, we need people who can contribute to the economy here. They are our kids. That's where we want to invest our money. So I will come back at some point at the end with Tim. We will ask for your formal support. I did want to provide this an update, and thank you for all the work you're doing.